Welcome to episode 189 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian starting my 16th year, I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Friends, I'd like to start off today's episode with a really special shout out to Casey Boyd and her wildly successful Boss Librarian PD, which was offered this past weekend. 2 days of free online professional development, which offered more than 20 sessions, all by amazing librarian leaders. Be sure to check out today's show notes because you will find a link to Casey Boyd's website as well as the recordings and presentations that were all offered this past weekend. I am not alone in saying I truly hope Casey Boyd is going to be putting on another spectacular show next summer for all the school librarians who want to participate. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners. Suzanne in Michigan, I wanted to congratulate you on your new job, and I really enjoyed getting lunch with you last week. Longtime listener Lori in Tennessee was very kind to share this message with me. She said, Amy, I'm a huge fan. Because of your podcast, I've genreified my biography section, won several grants. One brought in over 300 books in native languages and cultures of my ELL students. I ran a few book clubs virtually and am inspired each week with the new ideas from you and your guests. I'm very grateful that you decided to make podcasting your hobby. Additional shout outs this week to listeners Lisa in California, Shannon in Georgia, Stacy in Maryland, Catherine in Nevada, Megan in North Carolina, Molly in Oklahoma, Laura in Texas, and David in Washington State. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on Twitter, my handle is at LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning Pebble Go research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. And now in a segment I call Why I Love Capstone. Friends, I was so excited to see this announcement posted today this was August 16th, 2022, because Capstone wanted to make sure everybody knew about the substantial, and I'll read from the website, enhancements to its Capstone interactive ebooks platform. Among the improvements, the ebook platform and reader will be Section 508 compliant and WCAG 2.1 rated, ensuring Capstone Interactive is accessible to children with vision, cognitive, physical, and hearing disabilities. And friends, this is incredibly important because obviously whenever we make purchases for our collections, we want to make sure that we are considering the needs of all of our students. And we pride ourselves on the fact that we serve our entire school community, not just our students without disabilities. And friends, just a reminder, Capstone Interactive eBook Collection has a robust library of more than 5,500 interactive ebooks, with titles ranging from curriculum support to self-directed recreational reading, all designed for the diverse needs of school's curriculum. Capstone Interactive ebooks include read-aloud audio for every book, recorded from professional voiceover artists to engage students, and provide evidence-based scaffolding for pre-readers, struggling readers, English language learners, and more. With multi-user simultaneous access, Capstone Interactive can be used by every student in a school. Capstone is generously offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount for this entire school year through June of 2023, friends. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, National Board Certified Librarian, and my conversation with Melissa Gergen and Stephanie Wilson. Melissa Gergen, Stephanie Wilson, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us today.
Melissa, would you please describe where in the country you work? Tell us about your current library. What grades do you support? Give us an idea what your teaching schedule is like.
Okay, so I am located right below Albany, New York, or in the suburb of Albany, New York, in a large high school that serves about 1,400, a little more than 1,400 high school students, grades 9 through 12. We are flexibly scheduled, so we have 4 blocks a day. Each block is 82 minutes. We have 2 full-time librarians, 2 full-time clerical. I know I'm very lucky. And we have a large space that has 2 classrooms, dedicated classrooms, and we have a sound studio where we open it up to students to do podcasts. We also oversee with our computer technicians a student-run help desk to help with computer issues. We're trying to get that up and running since it kind of went down during COVID. And we also run an independent study class called E=MC². So students can choose any topic that they want and they can research it throughout the entire year. I run student book club, faculty book club. I'm going to be a part of the trio of advisors for yearbook this year. And I sit on the policy board for the Greater Capital Region Teachers Center.
Wow, never a dull moment. Quick follow-up. That faculty book club, are these professional texts or are these for fun reading?
These are for fun reading. I've been doing it. I have to go back in my professional development, see how long we were doing it. We've been doing it for years. I do about 5 or 6 meetings a year. I pick a theme for every month's meeting, put out 8 to 10 books, and I ask people to read at least one. And then we just have a conversation about the books and we discuss. I remember putting Hunger Games out there when that first came out, so I'll have to look at the publication date for that, and nobody wanted sci-fi or fantasy, right? So they all came back and they were like, oh my gosh, so that was a great moment. Oh, the other thing that I do is I run through BOCES, which is separate professional development it's called the Secondary Librarians Roundtable, where we get together. And actually one of the members, who's an avid listener of yours, Amy, she recommended me for this. So I have to do a shout out to her and thank her for that.
Well, and friends, that's how many of our guests find their way onto the podcast, because they reach out and say, don't interview me, but you need to interview a friend of mine. And that is a fantastic, opportunity to lift and showcase the amazing things that happen in our space. And it really does, when you raise the profile of the individual librarians in your district and in your county, it really does shine a light on all the amazing things that they're doing. And so what a wonderful, what a nice compliment. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you listened to your friend. Stephanie, twice in one summer, we learned of you in your first episode, Lunch in the Library, that you are nearly finished with your National Board Certification process. For listeners who have not heard your first introduction, would you please describe where in the country you are? Give us an idea about your library, the grades you serve, and what does your schedule look like?
Well, it's great to be back again. Thank you for having me. I work in the Mukilteo School District, which is 25 miles north of Seattle. Our district has about 15,000 students. I'm the teacher librarian at Mariner High School. I just completed my 27th year of teaching. 16 of those were the elementary, and the last 11 have been in the high school. I serve approximately 2,600 students in grades 9 through 12. We are beautifully diverse, but we do have a 20% turnover rate, which as a national board candidate, this is a challenge in itself. I work with a staff of about 120 teachers. I'm on a flexible schedule. And as I said in the last episode, I run a zone defense to serve the needs of our students. And I would say I'm on the snowflake model. No 2 days in the library are alike, which makes my world fun and challenging. The National Boards has kind of been my personal club right now, and I'm hoping that I'll get certified and get through my district remodel, library remodel, which we talked about in the last episode as well. I hope to, once I'm done, I can run a book club in the spirit of Jared Amato's Project Lit, which is a national grassroots movement dedicated to promoting culturally relevant books that create the level of reading. I am also a member of the Washington Children's Choice Picture Book Award Committee on behalf of the Washington Library Association School Division, which serves K-3 students, which is the highest honor in Washington State for a picture book. And over 105 students voted this year, K-3. And the winning picture book for us was The Barnabas Project by the Fan Brothers. I run their website. I vet about 300 picture books a year on top of reading and listening to a lot of young adult. And it's funny because my recommendations to my people are the two ends, picture books and young adult, which is, it's kind of weird and fun.
It sounds like both of you lifelong learners. I think I'm going to, we're going to have to keep track of just how many times we say lifelong learning, because it sounds like that is something that you are personally committed to, especially as people who have voluntarily submitted yourself to this process. So let's get into it. I'm curious to know what inspired both of you to initially look into becoming a National Board Certified Educator. And if you had sort of that light bulb moment, I know listeners would appreciate, because many of them sort of toy around with this idea. Stephanie, did you have a light bulb moment? Because was it lightning?
I'm going to give you a long bird walk, and then I'm going to answer your question. So, staff development for teacher librarians in Washington State, it's a bit hard, especially with the pandemic. And as teacher librarians, we're always working to improve ourselves, and some people work at the state level organizations. Some people work with ALA or AASL or ISTE, and some people go the route of to get certified, the badge route, to get certified in Google or Microsoft or Wakelet, all those fintech tools. And then there are teacher librarians out there who are teaching prep courses for new teacher librarians to the university level, and I applaud them. And right now, the big one, there are groups of teachers that are advocating for stronger school board policy with reconsideration of materials and challenges that are kind of popping up like whack-a-mole. And Amy, there's you! You're offering this amazing podcast to listeners around the world in bettering library land. With that being said, back in 2016, my husband and I took this huge leap of faith, and we adopted a very busy and energetic 2-year-old boy from Xi'an, China. So, fun fact, Xi'an is where the Terracotta Army is located. It should be on your bucket list to come visit. The process to adopt internationally started in 2006, and in 2021, we finished our last round of paperwork with the Chinese government and our adoption agency. Yes. And our son, who is currently 8 years old, he's an absolute joy. And my husband and I are better humans because of him. But from 2016 to 2018, I was in this weird bubble of being a new mama. And I was trying so hard to be proficient at my job. But I was also trying to figure out how to improve my teaching craft. But I was locked in this toddler schedule where naps and snacks were aplenty, and animated dogs solved the world's problems in 18 minutes on the Disney Channel or Nickelodeon. So during spring break of 2018, I'd had it. And I decided that I needed a piece of staff development that I could be in control for my own personal growth, but would also provide impact to my students. So I went online and I signed up for national boards with very little knowledge of what I was doing. And what I knew then and what I know now, I've come a long way, so.
I didn't mention it at the top of the episode, but friends, this is listener request. This actually came across my desk probably, and I'm going to say early June. And I sort of put out some feelers, and I do appreciate whenever, Melissa and Stephanie have had similar but very different experiences with this process, which is what makes this conversation so rich. But it is a listener request. We have listeners who have, like you, seen an opportunity to invest in themselves, and this is the route they're going to take. So, Melissa, how about you? Did you have an epiphany, a light bulb or a lightning moment where you said, this is what I want to do?
Kind of. I went to an interest meeting that was put on by my local teacher center to get some information about National Board out. And I went with my middle school librarian, and she and I great friends. And I should say that this was when I worked at another district, a much smaller rural district. And she and I were always battling to keep our elementary librarians, and we were always advocating, and we were kind of looking for something to kind of give us a little validity, credibility in our field. So we were kind of looking for something. We both went to the meeting, and I fell in love. I was like, holy crap, like these people know what it is I do for a living. Now I have to tell you, I'm going into my 25th year of teaching, and the first 5 years was as an English teacher. So when I made the change from English teacher to librarian within the same district, I had a lot of people making comments like, oh, it must be nice you don't have to grade papers anymore, or you must have so much free time. And I was very resentful of those comments and actually kept a diary of everything that I did and everything, but because I wanted to have this is why my day is so crazy. My day is like super busy. I'm taking home just as much work. I'm so when I went through the process of National Board, and when I took a look at the standards and what they were, asking of candidates, I was like, they know what it is I want to do in my library. And they seem to understand, our goals. So we both went together to that interest meeting. I signed on right away. She decided to go the admin route and to go into administration. This filled that void for me. So that's how I got into it.
I'll tell you what, friends, I am so grateful. When Stephanie and Melissa came to me and said, I actually have gone through this process, I knew that bringing these two experiences together was really going to help listeners, especially if you're contemplating making this something you would like to do and on your bucket list. It's going in that bucket list category, because I'll tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. So friends, I'm not exaggerating when I say in my 20 plus years of being an educator, I have worked with 2 National Board Certified teachers, and one of them at that point had become an administrator. Did either of you work with National Board Certified educators as you were coming into this? Melissa, did you have any firsthand experience working with somebody?
I did not at the original school that I was at. I ended up working with New York State is very, very supportive of teachers. They have the Albert Shanker grant, which pays for all of our application fee, which ding ding, that helps a lot and kind of evens the playing field across teachers. So that was really helpful. We also have the cohorts that I think are very supportive through the teacher centers that group people together and help them through the process. That being said, the district that I went through was also very supportive, and they had no idea what the process was about. So I was educating them through the process, and they were very, very helpful. Not many librarians in New York State had gone through the process. I was the 10th person in New York State to become certified in library media. But I was very fortunate that another librarian was within 30 miles, and I was able to touch base with her, and she was able to share. But, I think Stephanie will agree with me with the fact that the certification process is pretty, not standard. I mean, it's certificate specific. But there are a lot of things that are the same across the board with all the certificate areas.
How about you, Stephanie? Did you ever work with somebody who's nationally board certified? Because that, to me, would make a difference.
Yes, and I'll talk about it a little bit in a further question down, but this journey takes a village. And our state union, our Washington Education Association, they have a program called Jumpstart. And I'm certain there's the same program in other states where you have staff development for whether it's a few days or a whole week, and the 4 components are broken down. The national standards are explained because it's not Common Core, it's national standards. And you learn about the 5 core propositions and the rubrics, and you are placed in groups, and you're being mentored by people who are who are certified. And after I did this training, my local union association offered a cohort with teachers from surrounding school districts. And you're in a mixed group of educators. So I was in with a social studies teacher, an ELL teacher. I was in with a forensics teacher. I mean, I've met with a large group of people. And I met with this group monthly. It depended on the year, but from like October or November through May. And we met in person until the pandemic. And then we had there's that word pivot, and meet on Zoom. And there's other options out there through local universities. And I would just say you need to do your research and find out what best fits you, your schedule, which is a big one, and your needs. So, yeah.
Stephanie, it's cliche, but timing is everything. Can you share with listeners, where were you professionally when you decided now is the time for me to do this? Because I think sometimes there are ideas that would be beneficial, but the timing isn't right. So where were you? I think there are a lot of people who would love to pursue something like this, and they might have doubt that I haven't experienced enough to be ready for this kind of process. So what was your signal that I am ready because professionally, this is where I am in my life?
So first of all, don't let my color hair fool you. So I've taught for 27 years, and as long as I love teaching and I don't become curmudgeon-y, I'm in this gig for a while. And for your listeners out there, you can be a candidate for national boards with a Bachelor of Arts degree, a current teaching certificate, and you have had taught for 3 years. And in my Jumpstart, I had there are some super cute young teachers. I could have been their mom. I mean, and God bless them. Yes. At my school, here we go, the majority of our math teachers, career and technical ed teachers, ELL teachers, SPED teachers, world language teachers, and counselors are certified at my school, as well as several English and social studies teachers. And this motivated me because it made me want to be a better educator amongst my colleagues. And having them there to guide and support me in this process has only been helpful.
Wow, that's incredible. And I will say, I've said it out loud, I have some coworkers in my new school who call me mom. And I am their work mom. I have been known to dole out some well-timed hugs. There have been tears in my workroom, not mine, but somebody else's. And so I am somebody's work mom, and I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. So how about you, Melissa? What was your, I'm ready now? This is something that professionally I can take on.
Well, when I went to that interest meeting, like I said earlier, a lot of the information just kind of hit with me. And then coming together with that cohort, I was in a very similar cohort like Stephanie. We came together, we were talking, and I connected with the people that were part of that cohort and really decided that this was for me. When I first certified, I started the process in 2003. I think. I started the process and early on in my career as a librarian, and I did not certify right away. And I know that we kind of talked about this. I missed by 1 point. I found out that I was pregnant with my second child after I registered for National Board. And back then it was an all or nothing kind of deal. So once you registered, I had to do all the components and the testing all on that cycle. There was no backing out once I had already applied for the grant and everything else. So it was like a all or nothing kind of thing. So I was in at that point, but with the understanding that because I was pregnant, and I didn't know what was in store for me with that pregnancy or home life or whatever, I wasn't dead set on achieving. I knew that there was a possibility that I wasn't going to achieve. And I missed by 1 point, but I was willing to kind of keep on and to move along, and then ultimately certified in 2005 and then recertified, that's a whole nother process when you decide to recertify, whether or not it's something that you want to do. So I recertified in 2015, and then I have that option of recertifying again in a couple of years.
Random, but I have to ask, it also would depend on how well situated you are in your building, because the one person I knew who was a National Board Certified teacher, she taught in a 5th grade in one of my buildings. And I was like, ooh, that's something that I might like to do. I was exploring the podcast. The podcast was going to be something I was looking to do. But here was something, an accolade. I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And this person very, very frankly sort of mentioned to me, here's the challenge. You work in multiple buildings. Not only do I work in multiple buildings, those building assignments change every year. So I realized, looking at the process and my personal circumstance, that it would not lend itself well, because I work in 4 buildings a year. And the next year, I'll work in 4 different buildings in different configurations supporting different classes. And other than being a hugely toxic sort of scheduling nightmare, it really did make applying for this particular endeavor a little challenging, because my personal connections with those buildings was very difficult to establish moving forward into a process like this. Yes, Stephanie.
And it's time consuming, and I am a product of that time. So you have 5 years. Once you sign up, you have 5 years to go through the process, and you have to make attempts on all 4 components within the first 3 years. So there's your math problem right there. So during the Jumpstart staff development, we were given a calendar to map out all the stuff we had to do for work and personal. So when you do inventory, when there's state testing, when you do orientation, when you do that big research project with that specific department, you have to attend someone's wedding or a surprise party. And because they wanted this commitment of time and to be realistic. But there's also unplanned things. For example, I had a kidney stone show up like 2 nights before I was supposed to film during the pandemic in Zoom. And I'm in the ER going, do you have Wi-Fi? Like, will the assessors know that there's an IV in my arm? And they were just like, no, go worry about your kidney stone. I'm like, no, I have to film, But in that small exercise of planning out, I knew being a mom and being a teacher, I wasn't going to be able to do it in a year. And the people who can do it in a year, I have so much respect for. But I knew I would be on a 3-year plan, but in hindsight, I should have been on 2. And the other piece is, if you have a significant other or a partner, you're going to need to be on board with each other, because time management is going to be essential. And during the work week, I worked about 2 hours a day on it. And after work and on the weekends, I easily put in another 10 hours, almost. Yeah, easily. And the work goes in cycles. And the hardest demon for me was myself. Because if I wasn't working on it, I was thinking about it. And I had to get past that, for sure, to take care of myself and my family needs. And during the pandemic, we learned a lot about pivot and self-care. And you do need self-care in this journey to remain sane. And the truth is this. Your house isn't going to look like the Pottery Barn catalog. Your Instagram feed of amazing food, it's not going to be as amazing until you know you're done.
Well, and it sounds like it wouldn't be advisable to be in graduate school as well. This seems like, and this is not the week to decide you're going to train for a marathon. Yes, Melissa.
I would equate going through the process to being the same as taking 2 graduate courses at the same time, like working, having a family. So to me, it was like taking 2 graduate courses with the writing. It's very important, like you said, Amy and Stephanie, to sit down with your partner and the other people in your house and even the people that you work with, and kind of talk to them about what you're going to do. I earmarked Mondays and Wednesdays from 8 to whenever I needed at night to so I was writing a lot of times with Monday Night Football on in the background, kind of as my background. Saturdays I would do some things. I was pretty open to the fact that I might not certify in that first year. So I think that took a lot of pressure off me. A lot of other people in my cohort did different things, like somebody, talked to their husband and they got somebody to clean the house every other week to alleviate some pressure. Some districts, unions provided them with food periodically or at different times during the process. process, like when it was crunch time. There's different things that people kind of, either let go of or they, just kind of focused on. So I think that that's important. Like having those conversations is really important.
I'm going to be blunt. What is your why? Ultimately, what is it that convinced you that pursuing this ambitious and what I can only imagine is incredibly time-consuming process, and this is something that you've like made that mental commitment to doing this? Melissa, how about you?
I think I cheated and mentioned this earlier again, but going from English into library and just understanding that the process really saw and understood what it is a librarian does, I thought was very, very powerful. I felt seen, and I had great support from my district. I mean, my district didn't have, that I started off with, the process with, didn't necessarily have a stipend attached, but, they gave me the days to meet with my people. They gave me the professional development. My superintendent at the time made the football coach give me the video camera to video, because back then it was the big video camera. The editing, they asked the editing crew, our tech crew, to help me edit. So I felt supported. And I think that really helped me get over that initial hesitation of whether or not this was good for me.
That sounds amazing. I love that other people were involved in this process, because I think it's too easy for us to assume that we solely bear the responsibility of getting over that finish line. And yet this sounds more like a team effort. You do want to involve your coworkers. You do want to make sure that people are aware this is something you're doing and it's important. And, I love also because your staff realizes the investment you are choosing to make in yourself. Yes.
So one of the things to bring up is I appreciated the support, but what is hard and what you might need to understand is not everybody understands exactly the hoops or the things that you have to do for the process. So not everybody can review. And I'm sure Stephanie has kind of come across this as well. I would have some colleagues that were, trying to be helpful and asked to look at what I was writing, but they didn't have the time invested in understanding the questions or the standards I was trying to approach. So they would ask me weird questions, or they would just write, "Good job. I love what you did here." And that's not really the feedback that you need. You need constructive, if I need somebody to be able to cut words because you can only do so many pages, I need somebody with a red pen that can kind of go in there and take out all the fluff for me. It's hard finding people that can read. So I just wanted to make that, it's great to have that supportive team, but you need a whole separate supportive team, right, Stephanie, to help read your documents.
Because you have your cohort, you have your colleagues, but then you need the side gig. So your side gig of people, but those people, most of them, like my mom and dad read for me. They're both retired educators. My mom's a retired teacher. My dad's a retired superintendent. And they were great, but my mom read it for grammar, which my mom is, bless her heart, I love her. And that's great. But I also had another teacher librarian, middle school, who is certified, read it. I also had people that were nationally certified, not in my area of expertise. And they were very blunt of like, you didn't answer the darn question. You need to go back and answer the question. But yeah, the support, the layers of support and the tiers of support are great. I love the football team helped you out with the camera. I'm like, because you need to be friends with your VisCom person yeah.
I think that's adorable. So, what formalizes this start of this journey? And, it's sort of like it's a defining moment because you sort of, I think Melissa's already said, you sort of point of no return. You've already made this commitment, but Stephanie, can you tell us what formalized the start of this process for you?
Yeah. So you go to the National Board website and you sign up, and it's $75 to sign up for the, just to do the, yes, let's talk about the money. $75 gets you in the door. And then here's the deal. You start playing with the dates. So there's a list of dates in the window that when you can, for example, go and take the written exam, where to take the test, when to submit your portfolio entries. And if you're in too deep, I'm a skier, so I refer to it as you're in a mogul bowl. If you want to get out of the mogul bowl, if you find out, you know what, this isn't for me, this is not working, this is not a good fit, you can get out and get a refund, but that you have to commit pretty early on getting out of there. And we'll talk about the payment of it too, but there are loans available if you need financial assistance in the process, and your state union can talk you through this journey as well. So it is open and equitable for educators.
I would say what's interesting is that the registration window is so huge. So looking at the important dates for 22-23, like the registration window is July 13th through February 28th. So all the information that you need is online. And it is accessible to people, so they can kind of look at it and kind of, you won't get your candidate number and you wouldn't get any specific, I don't even know what you get anymore since so much of it's online. So I don't know, you don't get the box anymore. So, so I think that you really can go to some meetings and maybe kind of get a feeling for it. And you can register within that window. That window's huge. Do I recommend, if you're really truly interested in going through the process, getting started as soon as possible? Yes. And those kickoff meetings, those jump starts, take advantage of those. You will really do the research. Talk to some people that have recently gone through the process, because they'll be able to help you out. But there's a big window there. And now that you can do it over multiple years, I mean, really, talk to people.
Yeah, Stephanie.
And like Melissa said, you can go online without paying, and you can look at the 4 components, and you can decide, hey, this is something that I would like to do to improve my professional growth. Or you're going to say, I don't have the time or the energy to do this. This is way bigger than I thought it was going to be. So you do have access to some documents for sure.
I love there's that transparency. I think it's important, especially for those of us moving through this process, to appreciate all that's being expected of these candidates. Let's take a little talk about the time. I know Melissa was sharing a little bit about the timing of her registration. During my first class in library school, I got pregnant with twins. And I will not forget this anytime soon, going to State Hall with a sleeve of saltines and a can of Sprite and my ultrasound picture of my, now 20-year-old twins. And I remember sitting for my exam feeling, just gross. And I was 9 weeks pregnant. I already had an ultrasound of my twins, and again, a sleeve of saltines, my Sprite can, and it's how I got through my first exam. And then I didn't take another class until they were 18 months old. But my window for Wayne State University was 6 years. And you better believe I came up against, like, my kids were starting kindergarten when I finished my program. So, I appreciate a window. Melissa, can you talk about the window during which this process, start to finish, has to happen?
I got pregnant right after I registered. So, I found out I was pregnant. Let's just put it that way. So, my window was really cut short. Like Stephanie was saying, like, you have that window. So I was videotaping pregnant. Yeah, that was fun. So, and I could only, because I was going out after the holiday recess, I had to have my videotaping done before. I had to have all my student samples done before. So my window was a little crunched. So, you can register as early as July 13th through February, but really that whole school year, you can kind of use whatever you want. But you have multiple years. So if there's lessons that you do in the springtime that you want to take advantage of, then you might want to save that for a certain year, or take a look at the teachers that you're going to be working with, especially if it changes, Amy, like you were saying. But whatever you're going to turn in, it's in May, I believe. Stephanie's probably better off to do this, but you have to kind of commit to what components you're going to do and then turn those in during the May deadline.
And I have a question. It sounds like you do have a chance for constructive criticism. You do have a chance to resubmit. This isn't you have a one shot, and if you miss it, you're out. I mean, it sounds like there is an opportunity for everybody to learn and to grow. Yes, Stephanie.
So I will be very transparent and human. And in this question, so you have 5 years to go through the process. But you just, as I said earlier, you have to make attempts on all 4 components within the first 3 years. So my first year I did it because I still had a toddler. I dipped my toe in. I did component 1, the test. My second year, I did component 2 and 4, which I'll talk about later, and the specifics on that. But that's when the pandemic hit. And in my cohort, the number of people who dropped out at that time was huge because they didn't have enough data to support the commentary and the forms to turn in their portfolio entry. I did component 3 when we were remote during the 2020-2021 school year. So I was like, yay, done. And then in December 2021, I received my scores. I did not certify. And I truly believe it's hard to be clear, concise, and convincing in Zoom, which is where I had to teach. Although, I tried really hard. But this was the week before winter break. I went in I cried my eyes out on Saturday. On Sunday, I wrote a plan. On Monday, I went in, I talked to a couple teachers, and I said, I need you. And they were both certified, and they said yes. During the winter break, I mapped out every piece of what I needed to do to ensure the success. I also talked to my husband because we both knew the amount of time that was involved. And there is a sense of mom guilt of not being able to spend time with my son. But in January of 2022, at the height of the Omicron variant, I went back and I redid components 3, but I also redid 2 just to kind of pad my score and trying to think of this out mathematically. And I worked feverishly for 4.5 months. And fingers crossed this all works out for me in December of 2022. But if not, I have 1 year left to figure out a plan. So, yeah.
I really think that is an important thing to tell people who are considering this, that it's not like sitting for a test and if you don't pass, you've wasted all this time, because it sounds like each step of the way you are learning how to add and how to build on what you've already learned. So I find that very validating. Yes, Stephanie.
And just to add to that, when I didn't certify, it was like the village came out amongst my district and amongst my library colleagues in Washington State, because the help was there. And then I got to hear stories like Melissa of, I didn't certify by a point, or I missed this by 2 points, or the feedback that you got, it's very generic. And, but you do, through this process, do I regret it? No. Have I grown as an educator, as a teacher librarian? Yes. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me from this.
Fantastic. So, friends, I got to learn something really curious about Melissa. Melissa, not only are you board certified, but you've run cohorts for years of candidates who are applying for the process. Can you give us a little idea of what this entails? Because I think people who are considering this would be very reassured to know that they're not in this alone.
Okay. So when I was going through the process and trying to earn that 1 extra point to certify, the 2 people that ran our cohort looked to me and a colleague, and actually she was an elementary ed generalist through the certification process. And we had gotten very close and worked together and gave each other feedback. And they said, we're looking to give up this cohort. We would like to tap the 2 of you to take it over. So we said, okay. And we, because I was high school, I had taught in a rural and suburban school. She taught at an inner city school. We seemed to have all bases covered. I was a special. She was more of a generalist. So we wanted to show people and to pull people together. So we worked together for 6 or 7 years. We started off our kickoffs, which we've talked about in the summer, and we would do interest groups or meetings to kind of pull together a cohort. And then, like Stephanie referenced, we would meet once a month with our cohort at a very general location, usually at a centralized school district in the library. And we would come together and have conversations. So we would talk about certain things. And I probably still have my binder of materials upstairs. Like that summer kickoff, we would go over the 5 core proposition, the architecture of accomplished learning, which is all detailed in the National Board, that just kind of shows how teaching is very cyclical and builds upon different skills. So we would come together and just talk about different things. We would answer questions that our cohort members had, give each other support, because like Stephanie referenced, life still happens. So you have little bumps in the road for people as they go through the process. And some of that is professional. Some of it has to do with the certification, or some of it has to do with their life. And you really become a close-knit family throughout the process. So then I did it for 2 additional years after. So Dana and I probably over 50 people certified under the cohort when I was working with it. So that was really cool to kind of watch that happen. And like, it has a ripple effect, right? So like, that like all those people are becoming certified, and even the people that don't certified are changed by the process. And that their teaching is changed for the better. So when you start to think about all those students that are impacted by all those teachers, it's kind of a really cool feeling. And when I did recertify in 2015, that was one of the things I chose to write about, because I'm really big on professional development and making sure that it meets the needs of the people that are there. And so I just wanted to kind of point out like how this was just such a big thing in our area, really keeping that cohort alive. And then I passed it down to somebody that's certified under me, and she's still doing it. So yeah, it's very cool.
So, like I said, friends, this is listener request, and there are people who are listening to this episode, and I would not surprise me to find out that there are listeners who, as a result of listening to the two of you share your experiences, decide to make this a commitment that they want to do, an investment in themselves. So I'm so incredibly I'm feeling like some sort of slacker that this is not on my bucket list. I have my own bucket list. This is not on it, but I'm still feeling like sharing this conversation is really going to give school librarians the information they need to know moving forward. Yes, Melissa.
What I always said to people during interest meetings is that I value my undergraduate degree and I value my graduate degree in library. Don't get me wrong. But this by far was so much more meaningful because it was about me in my classroom, my library classroom, and working with students, where a lot of times undergraduate and graduate stuff, it just wasn't hitting that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Stephanie.
You're in a box in your undergrad or your master's degree and following what the professor wants. And the best part about these components, especially 2, 3, and 4, is choice. Like, you choose your path, you choose your students, you choose what you want to teach, you choose to analyze your work, which is you have that sense of control, and you get to reap the benefit of that.
Well, an agency, right? Isn't this where we say the word agency? Because this is the kind of professional development that suits us because it speaks directly to our individual needs as professionals. Yes, Melissa.
This also gave me the words to be a better advocate for libraries and students. When I got to my current school, it was awful. They had rows and rows of carols, and I was there for 4 years and itching to do a redesign. And it gave me the voice, I think, because of course I wasn't going to do it right away, make that major change. I was still working with somebody that was there from the previous structure. And I just, as I was writing the proposal for the redesign, I felt like I was pulling all that language from National Board. Like, anytime I would ask for stuff, it was, showing the impact on student learning and student experiences and the environment that you wanted to create in your library. So I felt that, one of the things I do recommend to people looking to go through the process is really digesting those standards, like taking and one of the things that I did, and I used to ask my cohort to do, is almost rewrite them in your own words so that you have that wording down. You can pull in stuff that you already know that you're nailing, and then maybe there are things that you want to focus on, or maybe are things that you'd never even considered to do. I really think that by the time you're done with the process, whether it's 1 year or 5 years, your teaching is changing.
Fantastic. For listeners like myself who have no idea what's involved in earning this accolade, let's break the steps down in how you become a National Board Certified Educator. And it's a process. And Stephanie, do you want to start first and give us an idea what is involved in becoming a National Board Certified Educator?
So there are 4 components, and hopefully Melissa and I can tag team on this, because I know that Melissa is OG. She's from the original process, and so I know it's changed a little bit, but it still involves those standards, which is the root of it all. There are 4 components, and component 1 is the assessment. It's the test, and it covers your knowledge. It's worth 40% of your overall total score. And you go to a testing center, and it's either a Pearson center or you go to a college and university, and the national boards will open a window of when you can go and sign up for an appointment for that. And in that, you have 45 multiple choice questions, and you have an hour to complete that. And the timer is going the same time. You have 1 constructed written response on program administration and management. You have 1 constructed response on technology, and you have 1 constructed response on collection development. 2 of the 3 questions that I received, and I can't tell you what it said, but what they asked me, but I would never have ever in my library career, will never happen. I'll just say that. And then for those constructed responses, you have 30 minutes to complete each of those questions. And then you can't take notes in with you. You can't take your phone in with you. They do a search. I have really thick hair. They went through, I'm like, are you looking for a thumb drive? Like what's happening? And you're taking a test with other people doing different certifications like nursing or construction or whatever. So you're not sitting next to someone doing their national board test. So, and then at the end, your score is converted to a 1 to 4 ranking. And then from there, it goes into a really funny score. Melissa, do you have anything to add?
I would recommend taking it. The window doesn't open, I think, until like the spring. So, or like February to May is when you can do it. I would think that doing the written portions, components 2, 3, and 4, which Stephanie is still going to talk about, I know Stephanie did the test the first. So, and that's the way she did it. But I think that people might benefit from doing the test after some of the written portion, because I think you have that language like I was talking about. You have that situations like kind of maybe more under your belt after you do some of the writings for the other 3 components. So I would suggest that. I mean, for me, because I did it all in 1 year, that was my last thing. I mean, I was still working on the other things a little, but the test was kind of like at the end. And I felt that I benefited from waiting on that just a little. But you don't want to wait till the very end, because just in case you get sick or something like that, you want to be careful that you give yourselves time to set up another date. Sorry, Stephanie.
And that's okay. And I would agree with you, because the experiences that you get from components 2, 3, and 4 are only going to enhance and help your experience with component 1 for sure. And there are study guides out there. They're okay. They're not the best. So, take it with a grain of salt. It's a lot about it is if you know your standards, the 5 core propositions, and you are strong in your practice, you'll do fine on component 1.
All right. What about component number 2? Who wants to take a stab at that?
Component 2 is differentiation of instruction, and it's worth 15% of your total score. You have the opportunity to highlight your ability to evaluate learning strengths and the needs for individual students. You have to plan and implement appropriate differentiated instructions for those students, and you have to analyze and modify instructional strategies and materials and have ongoing assessments. In this one, you have to have 4 work samples from 2 different students, and my biggest suggestion is have more than 2 students. So when I redid this one during Omicron, I had 4 students. 1 moved, 1 got COVID. I was left with 2 students and their work samples. I know. And I walked around with my Surface when I was working with them, and I just took detailed notes as I was going on this one.
Yeah. One of the things I can interject here is that for your student samples and for people that end up on your videos, you do need to have permissions to use their work and their image in all of your things. So sometimes that becomes another hurdle that you have to kind of take into consideration, because sometimes parents will not sign off on you using a student's work or having them in the video. So you have to kind of adjust accordingly.
And also for components 2, 3, and 4, you're going to submit a number of forms and provide a commentary. And forms are documents that are going to give the assessors more information about your school and your program and your students. And commentary shows like the instructional context, it assesses student work, and it gives you the opportunity to reflect as a teacher.
Awesome. What about component number 3?
Component 3 is the big one, my friends. This is your teaching, practice, and learning environment, and it is worth 30% of your total score. And this captures how you, details about your instructional planning, direct evidence is huge, of your practice from 2 videos, 2 video recordings, and instructional materials, and your analysis and reflection on your teaching. And this entry is also aligned with the 5 core propositions and several standards. And we'll talk about this one in a little bit, because Amy asked me.
Well, and you guys have already given listeners such a great idea of like what all of this entails. And friends, this is a really great time to mention that you are not going to want to miss these show notes, because the show notes are incredibly detailed. So how about component number 4?
Component 4 was the doozy for me. This is effective and reflective practitioner worth 15% of your total score. I wish it was worth more, because it's a commitment. This entry highlights your ability as an effective and reflective practitioner in developing and applying your knowledge of your students. So you're going to gather information from a variety of sources about students. You're going to use both formative and summative assessment, which is really interesting in the library land, and effectively plan to positively impact the student learning and provide evidence of collaboration with families, caregivers, the community, colleagues, and your contributions to learning communities to advance students' learning and growth. No big deal.
But doesn't this sound a lot like those student growth goals that we have to set every year? Is it possible that some of this can weave its way into your own evaluations that you're doing at school? Because all of a sudden I'm hearing things that we do already to satisfy our yearly evaluations. But Melissa, were you able to at all integrate some of this into your personal growth and the things that you did to be evaluated as an educator?
Definitely. I also got to look at my lessons and kind of figure out which ones would better work for the different components. One of the things that I will say as well is that the cohort really helps here, because you bounce ideas off of one another and you get ideas. Like, even I think one of the things that I ended up doing for one of my videotape lessons one year was something that a teacher came to me and from my cohort and said, "Hey, why don't you do this or tweak it this way?" And kind of, I was like, "Oh, that," and that was a classroom teacher. It wasn't a librarian kind of, so any kind of feedback like that. So if you kind of are hitting a stumbling block and not sure how to proceed with something, I mean, bringing those up at the cohort, that's really valuable.
Yeah, Stephanie.
And your cohort leaders are going to be very honest and tell you, you know what, this isn't going to cut it. You need to go back and rethink this, or maybe you need to defer on this component. You're not there yet.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I was like, square peg, round hole. That's not going to, it's just not, it might be hitting this and this. And that's sometimes a hard conversation to have. Some people are more willing to accept that feedback than others. I think that just to be open-minded and to be willing to accept criticism during this process too is really important.
I think you point out something very important, and that is this constructive criticism piece. It is so hard to hear from people we respect that there are things we need to improve upon. There are things we need to do better, and to rise to that challenge, because so much of what we do is ego driven. So much of what we do is very personal. When we put ourselves into those programs, it's hard to hear somebody look at what we do and say, nope, you can do better. And if this is important to you, you are going to do better. So that would be really hard. Yeah, Melissa.
And I think that as librarians, like, because we're born advocates, like as soon as you get that librarian, stamp of approval, like, and you're in a school, I think that you're an advocate. So I think it might actually come a little easier for us to toot our own horn because we're constantly putting ourselves out there. That was my role always, when I started the process, going through my cohort. I was always trying to, people would put out ideas and they're like, well, no, maybe that's not good enough. And I was like, no, that's, let's work on that. But, trying to because it is such a personal journey and you don't want to hear that, you score low. It's hard not to take it personal. And like Stephanie said, like that first reaction to not certifying is crying. But then, it's whether or not you pick yourself up, right? It's whether or not what your reaction is a week or 2 weeks later. Like, you get mad and you're like, well, damn it, let's go. Let's really show them I have this down, let's figure it out. It's hard not to take it personally, but I think that that's how you grow, right? It's how you react to those kind of things.
I think it's so vitally important that our listeners appreciate the candid nature of this conversation, because you are being very authentic and revealing about this process. I don't think we do our listeners any service by sugarcoating the process at all. It is work. And you two have come, have made this investment. I do want to ask, because Melissa, you recertified, which means, so we're talking about every 10 years.
So because I'm OG and I certified in 2005 and then I recertified in 2015, I think the change happened in 2016, 2017. I got in under the window. So when I recertified, it gave me another 10 years. I just made that window. Otherwise, I would have had to recertify every 5 years. So that was one of the big changes that they made. And some people grumble about those changes, but I really feel like this is really important. Like, as educators, we're constantly looking at what we're doing and we're correcting, not mistakes, but we're making things better, right? We're trying to, and one of the big criticisms early on with National Board Certification, it was like, well, 10 years, like somebody could sit on, their butt and not be doing stuff, which I find that really hard to believe. But I think that, and that's the impetus behind making the recertification now every 5 years. So, so I just got in under that 10-year window. Like, when Stephanie achieves, and I know she will, she would have to recertify every 5 years.
That's important, because you're right. You don't want people to become complacent. I've met very few complacent librarians in my career. I can count them on one hand. But truly, friends, I appreciate you sharing all of this. Let's get tacky, because money is something we can't just imagine isn't an issue. So let's talk about the actual cost of becoming certified, not the cost of your babysitter, not the cost of the pizzas and the dinners out because nobody cooked. Let's talk about brass tacks. What is the registration cost? Because for many people, that is an issue. Yes, Stephanie.
So it's $475 per component after the registration fee. And then if you go back and redo the component, you have to pay for it. So, which is, yes. So Christmas last year, I gave myself the gift of $1,000, to redo 2 components. So you can redo each component up to 3 years in the 5-year cycle. The nice part about component 1, the test, is you could go back and just do the test, or you could go back and just take one of the written questions again, or you could just go back and do all the written questions. And then it's not 475, it's 100, 125, something like that. And then my district provides incentives for becoming certified. So if you're at a non-Title I school, you get $5,000 extra a year. If you're at a Title I school, which I'm at, it's $10,000 a year. Yeah. Washington State, they take care of their educators, my friends. So.
Wow. And that is not chump change. That's a lovely incentive.
Yes.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So that's something I think that it's important when we are considering this process to also put some thought into financing it. And what does your district do to compensate you for the fact that you did this initiative? I realize that districts give their teachers money based on, how many graduate credits they have, but this process is so similar in the rigor that it expects you to go through. I think it's important to also investigate what kinds of financial incentives there are in place, both at the state, the district, and working with the people in your respective state, because it's going to be different. Yes, Melissa.
On the National Board site, there is some information where you can they give you a map of the United States, you press on your state, and it will go through the incentives, not per district, but it will talk to you about generalized state incentives. Like the New York one, for example, will talk about the Albert Schenker grant. When I went through the process is actually cheaper to now. It was $2,500 back then. Like I said, the Albert Schenker grant paid for in full for me. Now, what they do is they ask you to put up $500, and then if you achieve, they reimburse you. There are different states that have different incentives, and different districts have different incentives. I get $1,500 a year. $10,000 would be very nice. But you can see pockets where people are supported in their national board process. Those districts will have more people. And why wouldn't a school want to invest in having more nationally board certified teachers?
To add to that too, within that site, it will say if your district offers cohort support as well, or if you have to reach out to your union, your state to get the support. It's there. You just have to find it.
I'm so grateful that you two could bring all of this expertise to this conversation. Let's tie this up with a bow. Talk about what advice would you give? We've already, there's been so much helpful information that both of you have provided. Looking back on your personal experience in this process, Stephanie, what advice would you give to somebody listening right now, considering this process and going through this process?
So my biggest advice is find staff development that brings you joy. This process is not about how cute your bulletin boards are, what authors you've brought in or Zoomed with. It's all about student engagement. It's how you work with students to achieve specific learning targets. This is not a quick staff development turnaround for clock hours. It's a journey. You're going to need a cohort. You're going to need to find resources. You're going to need to surround yourself with people who can read your entries. You also need an infrastructure in place so that you can be a normal human being who can function at both work and home. And if you are borrowing classes, most teachers I worked with were gracious, but I had one that got quite fatigued working with me. And I was trying really hard to not interfere with her pacing of her class, but I was trying to get done what I needed to get done. But with that being said, properly thank everyone, whether it's a gift card to their favorite eatery or a bottle of wine or bring them coffee for a week. Properly thank the village that will help you out. Lastly, you will have to follow a writing formula that on the boards, and they're looking for descriptive, analytical, and reflective writing. You are on a huge space of font restraints, space restraints. There is no room for fluff. You have to be clear, concise, and convincing.
Oh my gosh, that's all great advice. How about you, Melissa? You've done this now more than once. What advice would you have for people who are like on the fence, or they're like, I'm going to do it? What would you tell them?
A lot of what Stephanie said is on my list. I would suggest, and I know that it's a lot, and people, if you're great with digital materials and able to read and highlight and make comments on digital materials, by all means, stick with it. So many of the people that went through my cohort, decided to print it out, to manipulate the information, to kind of work on things. I know some people don't, but they printed out the standards, they really highlighted, wrote in the margins, really digested that. But everybody has their own way of kind of doing it, but really kind of reading through all the material, making sure you understand what they're asking for, because Stephanie's right. You need to be clear, concise, and consistent. There is just no room for fluff.
Outstanding. Friends, I am so grateful, Stephanie and Melissa, for joining us. We'd love to know how we can follow you on social media. Melissa?
I've listed my school website. We've had a few snafus with my district and teachers' personal social media speaking for the school. So we have been asked not to have certain sites that list like our library and things like that. But I do have our library on there, and I by all means, I am on Facebook and Instagram. If somebody wants to find me, they can just do a simple name search.
Well, and friends, it's always an opportunity. If you feel like you would really benefit from reaching out directly to our guests, you're always welcome to go through me. And I have been known to forward messages from listeners who would like to get additional information and follow up with you on the episode. So friends, if there's ever any doubt in how you can get a hold of our guests, definitely send me an email. No problem. How about you, Stephanie?
I love to tweet, and you will find me. My handle is @MarinerLibrary in the land of Twitter. I also have a lockdown Instagram account at MHSMariner Library, and I'd be happy to let you in if you're a teacher librarian.
Fantastic. I'm so grateful to you two for joining me today, and have a fantastic rest of the summer and a wonderful start to your school year.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Friends, becoming a National Board Certified Librarian is a bucket list item for I know many listeners who are tuning in right now. And I'm so grateful to Stephanie and to Melissa for sharing not only their amazing perspectives and some of the things that they learned along the way, but also incredible resources in the show notes. You'll also want to make sure you visit Casey Boyd's Boss Librarian PD and the link in our show notes for all of the presentations that were given this past weekend. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, I encourage you friends to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more using the code UNITED. The topic of our next episode will be Independent School Librarian and my conversation with Melissa Pilot. I hope you will tune in.